the story of Moses' birth. This tale begins in a time when the Hebrew people dwelt in Egypt, their lives as numerous as stars scattered across the night sky. In those days, Pharaoh's heart had grown hard like sun-baked clay, fear taking root in his thoughts like thorns in fertile soil. He saw the Hebrew people flourishing like well-watered gardens, their numbers increasing with each passing season, and his worry grew like shadows at dusk. Among these people lived a woman from the house of Levi, her heart as gentle as morning dew. When she held her newborn son in her arms, she saw in his face a beauty that seemed to glow like the first light of dawn. Her eyes filled with tears that sparkled like precious gems as she gazed upon this child who seemed blessed by heaven itself. For 3 precious months, she kept him hidden away, like a rare flower sheltered from harsh winds. Each day was a delicate dance of careful movements and hushed lullabies, her love wrapping around him like a warm blanket against the cold world beyond their walls. His cries were softened by her gentle songs, his smiles treasured like pearls in the secret spaces of her heart. But as the days flowed past like water in a stream, she knew she could hide him no longer. His voice grew stronger, like a bird testing its first songs, and the risk grew with each passing sunset. In those quiet moments between night and dawn, when worry pressed against her heart like a heavy stone, she would pray for wisdom as soft as starlight to guide her path. With hands that trembled like leaves in a gentle breeze, she began to weave a basket from river reeds. Each careful twist and turn was a prayer, each strand a whisper of hope. She lined this floating cradle with pitch and tar, making it safe against the river's flow, like a mother bird preparing a nest with tender care. Into this ark of reeds, she placed soft cloths as gentle as morning mist, creating a bed as warm and safe as her own arms had been. With tears falling like quiet rain, she placed her precious child into this floating cradle, her touch lingering like a blessing on his peaceful face. His sister Miriam, young but wise beyond her years, stood watch nearby, her heart beating like a dove's wings against her chest. She was tasked with following this most precious cargo, her feet moving as silent as shadows along the riverbank, her eyes steady as stars watching over her brother's journey. The mother chose her spot with wisdom born of prayer, selecting a place where the river moved like honey, slow and sweet. Among the tall reeds that swayed like dancers in the morning breeze, she set her child upon the water. The basket bobbed gently, like a leaf carried by kind currents, coming to rest in a quiet pool where river plants grew thick as dreams. Miriam kept her vigil from behind the curtain of rustling reeds, her presence as subtle as a butterfly's shadow. Her young heart held faith as vast as the sky above, trusting in the same divine love that had guided her mother's hands in weaving the basket. As the sun climbed higher in the Egyptian sky, spreading light like golden honey across the water, footsteps approached the river's edge. The sound of women's voices floated on the air like music, drawing nearer to where the child lay hidden among the reeds. It was Pharaoh's daughter, coming to bathe in the cool waters of the Nile, her attendants moving around her like petals around the heart of a flower. The princess's eyes, sharp as an eagle's yet soft with compassion, spotted the unusual sight among the river plants. The basket, crafted with a mother's love, had come to rest precisely where it would catch the morning light, drawing her attention like a jewel catching the sun. When her servants brought the basket to her, and she lifted its cover like a veil being drawn aside, her heart melted at the sight within. There lay the child, his eyes meeting hers like two stars sharing light across the darkness of space. His cry rose soft and clear in the morning air, touching something deep within her soul, like a key fitting perfectly into a lock. In that sacred moment, as gentle as a dove's wing brushing against the sky, the princess felt compassion flow through her heart like warm honey. Though she recognized this was a Hebrew child, her soul responded to his needs like a flower turning toward the sun. The love that filled her in that moment was as pure as morning light on still waters. Miriam, watching the scene unfold like a dream coming true, stepped forward from her hiding place. Her feet carried her as light as leaf shadows dancing on grass, and her voice, when she spoke, was as clear and sweet as a morning bird's song. She offered to find a nurse among the Hebrew women, one who could care for the child until he was old enough to live in Pharaoh's house. Time seemed to pause like a held breath as the princess considered this offer. Then, like a stream finding its natural course, she agreed. Her words fell soft as petals on the morning air, giving permission for this small miracle to unfold. Miriam's heart soared like a kite in a gentle breeze as she ran to fetch her mother. Her feet barely seemed to touch the ground, carrying her home as swift as hope itself. When she reached her mother, whose prayers were still rising like incense to heaven, the news spilled from her lips like sweet water from a spring. And so it came to pass that the child's own mother was called to nurse him, to care for him in the light of day rather than the shadows of secrecy. The princess offered payment, like seeds of blessing scattered on fertile soil, for the care of this child who had captured her heart. In the cool shade of her own home, the mother held her son once more, her joy as deep as the Nile and as vast as the desert sky. She would have these precious years to nurture him, to whisper stories of his heritage into his ears like gentle evening breezes, to plant the seeds of faith in his young heart. The child grew like a strong young tree beside living waters, nourished by two streams of love. His Hebrew mother gave him roots, deep and true, while the princess's protection spread over him like branches offering shelter. In this way, Moses, for so the princess named him, drawing him out of the water, became a bridge between two worlds. In the gentle passage of days that followed, Moses flourished like a well-tended garden. His early years flowed like a sweet stream, blessed by the love of his birth mother, who taught him in tender whispers of the God of his ancestors. Each lesson was planted like a precious seed in the fertile soil of his young mind, while his days were warmed by the affection of the princess who had drawn him from the waters. As soft as dawn light creeping across the desert sands, wisdom began to bloom in his heart. Though he grew in the courts of Pharaoh, draped in fine linens and surrounded by Egyptian splendor, the early songs of his people echoed in his soul like distant music carried on evening winds. The stories shared during those precious nursing years settled in his spirit like stars finding their places in the night sky. The princess, true to her compassionate heart, raised him as her own son, her love flowing constant as the Nile itself. In the halls of power, he learned the ways of Egypt, its language and learning becoming familiar as his own reflection. Yet beneath these outer garments of privilege lay the undying memory of his true heritage, preserved like a treasure wrapped in finest cloth. Looking back across the gentle waters of time, we see how divine love had woven this tapestry with threads both golden and humble. A mother's desperate plan, shaped by faith as pure as morning light. A sister's watchful love, steady as the North Star. A princess's compassion, flowing like cool water in a parched land. Each thread essential, each one guided by hands both human and divine. As we rest in the peace of this ancient tale, let us remember that even in our darkest moments, hope floats like a carefully woven basket on troubled waters. Love finds a way, as persistent as a river seeking the sea. Faith, whether as small as a mustard seed or as vast as the Egyptian sky, can guide us through our deepest nights toward dawn.